Hello, ladies. Welcome to the Hourly to Exit podcast. I'm so excited for today's guest, Betsy Jordyn. Betsy, can you say hi?
Hi, so nice to be here. Thank you.
Oh, we're stopping. I don't know why I said
Okay.
that. All right, here we go again.
Okay.
Hello, ladies. Welcome to the Hourly to Exit podcast. I'm very excited for today's guest, Betsy Jordyn. Hi, Betsy.
Hey, Erin.
I'm so happy to have you here today. Lots for us to talk about, but before we get started, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. My name is Betsy Jordyn. I am a business mentor and a brand messaging and positioning strategist for remarkable consultants and coaches and their unique strengths and
Wow.
experiences and passions.
Very nice. Very nice. So who is your typical client and how did you come upon them? Did they choose you or did you choose them?
So my ideal client is usually somebody who's either like one or two phases in their career. They're either at a corporate kind of job and they're like, okay, I've had enough. I've hit the top. I wonder what is this for? I want to have control over my career, my life, and I want to have more significance. And I'm not sure how to navigate that. So that's like one set of my clients. And they know they want to start a business that relates to like their knowledge and their expertise, like a consultant, coach, speaker kind of person. Or it's somebody who they built the wrong business and it's not the business that they are loving and it's not the right one. I work with them and we use basically the same processes for both of them.
How do
And
they?
I think they find me because of my content, which is how you and I got connected.
Very, very nice. So I've heard you reminded me of this term boomerpreneur, but maybe that doesn't apply. Like we're people who have had this whole career and then and I guess that's kind of generational as well, but just they've had this whole career and now they want to like do this consulting or things like that. Is that a term that am I the only one who uses that term?
I don't know if I would use that one. I use more like corporate refugee or
Okay.
somebody who's like a mid-career professional. Like there's other people
Ooh,
like
I
Marie
like that.
Forleo who's out
Uh-huh.
there and she helps for, people who there. I think there's a huge difference between somebody who's an entrepreneur and that's their first career
Mm-hmm.
versus what it takes for somebody who's mid-career, who's got, a certain amount of perk status in their job, in their corner office, their status. Everybody's expecting so much from them. And for them to leave that kind of golden handcuff kind of situation
Mm-hmm.
into starting a business is completely different. And those are the people I really love serving the most.
Yeah, that is a shocker, as well as the kind of just the way things are staffed has changed. Like when I started my career, everyone had what was then a secretary, but then became an assistant. And then I remember this is maybe 10 years ago, I was working with a client and I'm like, well, just have your assistant send it to me. He's like, and this was the CEO of this. And he's like, I don't have an assistant. Like, because everyone just, kind of, and this, an entrepreneur, and they just kind of do things differently,
Mm-hmm.
and so to stop having that, support and becoming an entrepreneur, that's got to be quite the shock to the system. Well, that will actually kind of, uh, feed into part of what we're going to talk about today. I mean, there's many things that we could talk about, but that's corporate to entrepreneur transition. And in particular, in the consulting space where we're experts, we're using our brains, where we're going to talk about kind of the difference between, we're going to talk about profitability. I'll let you talk about what the differences are, but really about profitability, because when we're in corporate and we think about, okay, you have revenue and then you got all these overhead pieces and, rent and payroll and office supplies and, vendors. And maybe when we are solopreneurs, we don't have any of those things. So we think it's all profit, yay, where's the super profit, and we're not really thinking about kind of the big picture of making sure this what we're doing really is profitable. Does it really make sense for us to do this versus going back to the corporate job? And so I'd love for you to kind of talk start big picture about what profit is versus things like income and revenue and how that applies and the problems that you see among your clients kind of wrapping their heads around these things.
Would it be okay if I backed up and talked about like money mindset shifts and then
Yeah.
get into the profit?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the biggest things I think when people are leaving a corporate job and starting a business or any sort of job and starting a business is understanding that your relationship to money has changed. So when you're in a job, you're in a compensation model. So what that means is I do work and then I get paid for, like I don't even have to get paid for it. I get paid and I get compensated for the work that I do. And so it's a compensation model. And I think a lot of times when people leave that compensation model and they go into a business, they don't make that shift of saying, wait a minute, I have to create a business. And business is different. So business is about I invest money first and then I get a return. And so that's like the first big shift is I have to understand that I have to, like, we know if any one of my clients were advising their clients or going to a company, they would say, well, you have to spend money to make money. But when they leave and they start their own business, they think, well, I don't need to spend money. I could just just go out there and find clients. And I'm like, well, if you're going to just go out there and find clients, you're actually recreating your job in a business and you're going to wind up in that trading time for money trap because that's what you know. And that's what other people are. So we think, oh, okay, well, I'm going to go look for other busier consultants and take their carryover work, or I'm going to sign up for this coaching forum and they're going to bring clients to me. You're still in a compensation model. So there's no profit potential in a compensation model because you don't have a business. You have to think about money completely different when you are starting a business. That's why it's important that you invest properly in a really great website. You get clear in your messaging, you figure out who you're going after, and then you figure out like what are different ways that you're going to provide products and services that are scalable. And so that's like that first mindset is you have to go first. And it's interesting with expert knowledge workers is I always use the example of the hot dog cart. Because I think I did research one time around how much does it cost to like set up a hot dog cart. And it was like something like $50,000 you have to invest to buy a hot dog cart, get it up and running, find your corner and all of that. People would get that. Like, okay, I have to spend money on my hot dog cart. I have to spend money on hot dogs. I have to spend money on condiments in order to get sales. But when you're dealing with knowledge, it's like, well, I don't need to do that because I've been doing this for a long time. So it's the mindset is the first thing before we could even talk about the difference between profitability, trading time for money, and all that kind of stuff.
Thank you for that. Yes. Well, that's the danger of me trying to set up something without being the expert. So thank you for that. That is so important. I myself have been a victim of exactly what you talked about. And not that, I mean, some lawyers never leave that money mindset. But it is something that I see again and again. And on the one hand, the ability to go straight from our corporate job to quickly, creating income, so we can keep paying the mortgage and things is one of the benefits of it, but also one of the traps of it because you can get stuck there, right?
Well, you can't scale and it's not sustainable. Like when you're in a job and you're going the job search process, you only have to find one job and you're kind of done. Nobody wants to be perennially out of work, constantly on that hustle for, looking for the next gig and the next gig and the next gig. That's exhausting. And at some point, someone's going to say, well, forget it. I'm just going to go leave and get a corporate job because it's a lot easier, because it is a lot easier. And the other thing that you do when you recreate that kind of role, like I hate subcontracting. It's like, it makes me crazy because if you give control over how you set up work to somebody else, like you really don't have a business and you're not even really being a strategic partner to whoever you're helping. You do all of this where you're actually making less money. It may feel like you're making more money, but you're not, or you think you have more freedom. You're working the same amount of hours without any colleagues, really that are your colleagues, without any career opportunities, and without all of the other stuff. So it's like, it's the worst of all worlds from my perspective. Other people might like it. If you like it, cool. Like, I don't judge you. It's awesome. But from my standpoint, I didn't leave my corporate job. I was a senior leader at Walt Disney World. I had a great career. I had many opportunities I could take in my career anywhere. If I wanted that, I would have stayed there. But instead, I wanted to have control and freedom and all those other things.
Yeah, there is that illusion that we'll get control and freedom from going out on our own, right? But if we really think about it, if we don't have some of the things you're going to talk about in place, that we just have created a job without benefits and without upside. So, all right. So let's get to how you help clients make that mindset shift.
Well, the first things first is we really talk about like what kind of business you really want to start, and get clear that you're starting a business. So it's like, to me, the way I help my clients is it's more of an action learning kind of thing. It's not like I just sit there and say, all right, well, your mindset's going to shift. It's like your mindset's going to shift as we do certain things, as we clarify who your ideal client is. That's a starting point, because then you're going to get clear of like, oh, okay, I have a business that's supporting somebody specific, rather than here's my expertise. Like that's where the flip is that, when you're looking for a job, like the spotlight is on you and all of your expertise. When you build a business, the spotlight's on your ideal client. Kind of for you, when you were making this shift, is you were a corporate person who is, you had all this legal IP advice, but you decided, I want to help women experts, and there's a bigger why. So you get really clear on that, and that starts creating that shift. And then I work with my clients through like, how they're going to stand out in the marketplace. And then we work on their website. When you have your website, that helps you start thinking about like, okay, I have to really work on, marketing system. And I have to start thinking about like bigger picture, like what's my online like platform that's not just like a brochure kind of website. So the mindset changes. Like, I'm not a believer of mindset changing. Like I just sit there in isolation, my mindset changes and then I could do actions. I believe that as you do actions with intentionality, like knowing like, here's my mindset gap. Like if I have a money issue, we're going to have an actual tangible thing. Like, okay, let's talk about your website, and how do you want to set it up? And what's the money you're going to leave on the table? And we work on it from that standpoint. So there's like direct things, there's like the action learning kind of things. And then there's like advice I might give along the way. Like number one, I don't believe that there's many ways that you could set up your business, but I think you need to have business money separate and personal money, like those, like a wall between the two, so that you start thinking about the profitability of your business and thinking about like, I'm going to get a salary out of it, and that's going to go over here. But sometimes people kind of like lump it all together. Yes. Like I have a client who sent me a spreadsheet from a different forum that she was working on how to figure out how much to charge, different than the way that I would set it up. And they included like, here's all my personal expenses and here's all my other things. And this is how much money I have to make. I'm like, no, your personal expenses are over there. Your business, you have to put a wall, like there's a wall between the two, so that you can look at your business profitability separately from here's my income.
Well, let's dig into that, because I do think people get really hung up on that. And it certainly, it was for first decade of my business, freelancing business. I definitely was everything that I collected from my clients was Erin's. And that's how I paid the mortgage and sent the kid to school. And that was it. And there wasn't this business in the middle with me getting payroll. So tell us about one, like, well, how do you work with your clients? Do you help them set up a separate entity, or do you just do it with the books without having a separate entity? Like, how do you like to work with them to make that?
So you're the person, like someone like you who's like more of a legal person or an accountant person, I would say like that's outside of my wheelhouse. Like that's not, like I'm more of the principles and the mindset. And it's like, I could tell you, like, I could say like, well, based on my experience of doing this for 15 years or so, like, here's what I know. And here's what my accountant taught me. But then here's how I've learned how to think about my business differently. Like, there's no problem, I don't think, like to borrow from your business to go over here, but you still have to think about your business separately. So it's like when you're thinking about the profit equation, it's not really like, I try to help my clients even like go to like from your business revenue kind of perspective, like how you right size your lead generation goals and how you do all of that. So the profit equation is not all that confusing, in some ways. Is you have revenue minus expenses equals profit. So you have to be looking at your expenses, but you have to look at your expenses differently from just expenses to investments. Like, so you got to think about like everything has to be in an ROI kind of mindset. Like everything that you do is about an ROI for your business. So if you're investing in,
let's start over with this one, because I don't think that was the right question for you. So let's look at it from we're talking about, me kind of conflating the two. So let's go to, when you have someone like an Erin who just has her money come in and is not thinking about whether or not it's profitable, whether or not I actually have a profitable business. Do my offerings make sense? Is the way I'm billing make sense? Would it be just, would I be better off just going back in house? Like, what are the steps to helping them think through that?
Well, first off, I would never suggest if somebody really feels like their next step and their big calling is to be a business owner. I would never say you need to burn those bridges. Like the only way that you're going to be successful over the long term is to be committed to being successful over the long term. And you're never going to figure it out right at the gate. So the first thing I would say to you is like, of course you approach it that way. No harm, no foul. And the secret to your long-term success is like you try some things out and you kind of pivot and you go. So if you're sort of like, it's not a problem, if you're depending on how you set things up, if you want to have it mixed, like some people like to have it mixed, and that is a way to do it. I believe in the firewall, but the key would be is like, I would be asking you, like, how are you investing in your business and what kind of return are you looking at? And there's other ways that you would price your services. Like if you're not making enough money from your services, like, well, we need to look at your products and services and how you're framing them up. Like, are you setting up, because there's a way, like a lot of coaches do this, is they set up their business in this hourly type of thing. Where it's like, okay, well, I have my 1 hour package, that's a couple $100. I have my 8 package one where it breaks it down to $150 a coaching session, and that kind of thing. Like, well, you're never going to scale that one.
Right.
And that's not interesting. I would probably say, all right, Erin, let's talk about your ideal client, and let's talk about what the problem that you're solving. Let's talk about who they're turning to solve those problems and where the gaps are. And let's frame up a very interesting signature program that would have a variety of different elements that would be of more value. So it's like, we want to look at it from that angle, and we want to look at like, well, what are your profit goals? So if you want to make, let's say, $100,000 a year, and you think your average price per client is X, and it's like, okay, so I need to create like a $5,000 program. It's like, well, what would we need to include to make this a $5,000 program? It could include X number of coaching sessions. It can include a membership forum. It can include an online course. It can include on-call access, which, by the way, is high value that people undervalue. And people don't do this on-call trusted advisor kind of thing because they're worried that people are going to take advantage of you, and they're not. But it's high value. Like, I could call you when I need to, maybe you include like office hours, or maybe you include live retreats, and all of that is $5,000. So for example, I worked with a girl named Rachel. She's a dating coach. And she was initially starting off with like, I'm going to kind of do this. And then it's like, no, let's create your program, and her program includes an upfront assessment, and a certain kickoff in-depth coaching session around X, Y, and Z. Then she has like X number of coaching calls. Then she has like the dating profile review included in the program. And then of course, adding in those special bonuses, and it's all about how you frame it. And that's a scalable offer. That's interesting. Now people are going to be like, oh, okay, I'm willing to pay more because of the return.
Okay, got it. And so when you use the term investments, like what does that mean specifically? I mean, in coaching and, other types of human resources, like what does that mean, investment?
I think everything that you do for your business, you need to think about it as, so you could look at the profit equation and say there's revenue minus expenses equals profit. But when you're a business owner, there's some things that are just like expenses. You might say it's like, okay, like for example, I use Kajabi as my platform. And I could look at it as a straight cost, or I think about like, well, what does Kajabi offer that allows me to scale? So Kajabi is like a all-in-one kind of platform. So I get my website, I have my email marketing, I have my landing pages, I have my courses, and all of this is in one place. So if I'm spending like $150 a month on Kajabi, I'm spending less if I were going to do all of those things separately, but I'm also spending less time because everything's all in one place. But then I have all my tools that are there. Like if I can master, like getting into Kajabi allowed me to go from just mentoring people to creating websites and to working on pipelines and helping people with courses, because I learned how to do this myself. So every time I get a bill from Kajabi, every time I see it every month, I feel happy. Like, yes,
Mm,
because I know I'm investing. Or
mhm,
you might invest in a virtual assistant, and you think about the money that so you think about the time you might spend. So here's an example with a virtual assistant. So I wound up signing up for working with different organizations. And if you think about like how much they might charge, so you can get some VAs from other parts of the world for like $9 an hour. You can, I don't know what the US prices are,
mhm,
or so just do the math is let's say you're going to work on a PDF like in Canva or something. It might take you 10 hours, but if you think about it from your salary standpoint and how much you're worth per hour, this could be like a $10,000 PDF. If you have a VA, it's like way less.
mhm.
So it's like thinking about money differently. Everything when you're a business owner, you have to think about money differently. And your relationship with money is different. And you have to spend the money first in order to get the return.
Got it.
Everything that you do. And so if you're thinking like, oh my gosh, I don't have a lot of money. Like when I first started my business, I was going through a horrible divorce. I lost all my money, like all of it. I had $200 in the bank, and my grandmother had passed not that long ago, like not long around that same time. And she
Mhm,
left me, I don't remember exactly how much, but it was like, it was enough to cover my initial business expenses. I
mhm,
could have taken that money and lived for like like 6 months, and I could have lived off of that. Or I took that money and I paid for mentoring so I could learn the skills I needed to learn as a business owner. I
mhm,
invested in a website, and you'd appreciate this. And I invested in content creation from the get-go. So
mhm,
I invested in getting articles, and I invested in learning how to create videos. And from that standpoint, I grew my business at that point literally from zero. I mean, I guess you could say 200 is not zero, but let's just say zero to 300,000 in the first 18 months.
mhm,
And it's like my mindset changed. Like when I was standing in front of my first opportunity I had right after I launched my website, I had a client who really wanted to work with me. Like they handed me a proposal and say, meet or beat this job's yours. And it's like, you know what? I saw myself differently. I took a step back and I said, and again, I was like really in the hole, and I was a single parent at the time.
mhm,
And I looked at their proposal. I'm like, nope, this is not what's in the best interest of the client. I gave a different proposal. It was, I think like 5 times more than what the competitor did. And the clients were freaking out. They're like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to like break the bank to work with Betsy. And I'm like, mm-mm. And something came over me. And this is a phrase I use all the time. Like, no, that other person, that is an expense. It's an expense that you're going to have. I'm not an expense to be managed. I'm an investment that will deliver a return.
mhm.
And they were like, whoa, and then they signed
Yeah.
immediately on the spot. So it's about the mindset around like, I'm an investment. And
Mhm,
so I have to invest in myself. I'm the product. I'm the product. I'm the
mhm.
service. I have to invest in myself, and then I'll get a return. That's the key and then you're going to think about things more creatively. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Well, it did more than that. It was great. I mean, because that is so interesting to me because I like to, um, talk about things like law, investing in lawyers, or and they're thought of as expenses. Like, okay, this is like something I have to do. I don't want to do it, but I got to do it, and it's risk avoidance, and versus like if you use lawyers strategically, to help you, put pieces in place that build that foundation so that you can grow. It is an investment, investing in contracts, investing in content. Um, and I have noticed in like proposals, like if you see something on site online and they'll have their prices and they'll say investment as opposed to price or cost, and I like that because it really is just thinking about it from, okay, this is something that will have a return on investment. If I do my job right, you do your job right, it's a return on this and it will help your business grow. So I like that you use just the term investment instead of expenses, things that we could think of that way, but I think it's the wrong way to think about it. I really like that explanation. That was fantastic. Thank you.
Well, speaking of attorneys, though, like you're an unusual attorney, who's also a coach. And so
Mhm.
you are a strategic partner. The problem that you might have is that your field on the whole is very much by the hour and very much commodity. And it's like you get into the legal situation and they don't have like a big picture plan. So the same things that I would recommend to my clients who are coaches is like, you need to have like some sort of defined value that you're going to create for a client at the end. Like, so if I were going to work with you in a previous iteration, it's like, okay, I want to protect my intellectual property. It might be, you would charge me $500 an hour, boom, boom, boom. Now my money's up in 3 hours.
Right.
Or you would say, I'm going to help you create a body of work that is monetizable. And let's say your package is $10,000, but it's capped and it's a value, and I'm going to create a different kind of outcome. Now I could think about it differently. But most lawyers don't operate like as strategic partners.
Yeah.
They set themselves up because the legal field, that's why burnout is so bad. It's like by the hour. And then you get, the client gets to the end, like, I never, ever, ever charge by the hour.
Yeah.
Maybe very rarely for like a one-off, like
Yes.
if somebody needs like a one-off kind of thing, it's like, okay, before I sign up for this whole big program with you, like, can I just do like a 90-minute session? It's like, okay, fine, I'll do that, but never charge by the hour. Ever.
Yeah.
Ever. Because if you are by the hour, first off, I haven't been an hourly worker since I was, I don't know, like, when did I get my first job? I was 21. Like, what was the last time I was an hourly worker?
Right.
Like, I'm not going to go back and be an hourly worker ever.
Right.
But when you're talking about, your mindset, it's like your mindset influences the clients. Like, I'm an investment, and therefore I'm going to encourage you to be an investment. And the thing that gives clients happiness is like, oh, you're promising a transformation. That's different than I'm going to do X, Y, and Z in methodology.
So you help people think about the way that they're pricing, they're offering in terms of outcomes versus inputs. Like I
help them think about the value that they create so they can own their worth, and they can price properly based on the transformation that they're going to create for the clients that's meaningful to the clients.
Right. Yeah.
And then they invest themselves properly in order to deliver on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a good story about the hourly. So, I worked with, IP-based businesses for many, many years. And one of my big clients is in the market research space. And then someone had gone over to another market research place, and they're like, oh, I know that I've worked with other lawyers. I have to explain everything to them. It takes them forever to figure it out. I know that you know exactly how to do this. Well, I did. And it took me like no time to I can do this in my sleep. I can fix your problem completely in an hour. And I was charging by the hour, and I fixed their problem immediately because I'd been doing what they needed for 10 years. And so my reward for that was, getting almost nothing. So you definitely
so if you were a more junior person, it would take you 20 hours and you would have made more money.
Right.
So you're penalizing yourself rather than if you can get it done in an hour.
Right.
I just did an interview with an executive on my podcast. And he was saying like a lot of consultants are looking at just the like, here's the economic value. And he's like, you got to understand the return on time. Yeah. So in some ways is like, well, I can take 5 hours to do this and it's going to cost a less price, or I'll get it done in an hour, and you could charge the premium for the speed.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. No, it's a tough one. And you work with men and women, but for many women have trouble feeling like they're overcharging for things. Like they know, like, for instance, this, like, I know that I could get that done, like, and be done by, in time for lunch. And how can I charge for that? And, but at the end of the day, what is the value to the client is really what matters there. So
I think men and women both struggle with, like, especially if you're a knowledge worker, and you're getting paid for your expertise, it's very hard to put a price tag on. I see men and women equally struggle with that whole thing. But I think what women struggle with more is if somebody doesn't have money, like, then they feel bad for them, where men don't care that much. Like, women are like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll discount it because it's like, I like you and I want to help you, or yeah, let me do this for you for free. Like, we're much more codependent from that standpoint. And men are really good at like, well, like, this is part of my paid program, and men are more aggressive in asking for the sale, more than women could be.
Oh, interesting. So do you have them, do you group coaching, or are they all individual, one-on-one?
I just launched a group coaching
Mhm.
experience. So I take people like through that whole transition, from like, I have an idea, I want to launch it, I want to move into this thought leadership space. There's some stuff that just requires one-on-one kind of stuff. So I do
Mhm.
a lot of VIP days, like brand messaging kind of stuff, wording, copywriting, and all that kind of stuff. Like that's more like one-on-one, and it's
Mhm.
not really something that lends itself to a group. But I've been very passionate about bringing groups together
Mhm.
because of the power of being with other people who are in the same place that you
Right.
are, the
Mhm.
learning, and it's been really powerful. So I started this Purpose to Profits Academy is what I call it. And the promise here is like, we're going to get into really actionable kind of training to help you develop all the skill sets that you're going to need over time. Because as a consulting, a coaching business owner, you have to learn the skills. You didn't learn it, if you
Mhm.
were in corporate. And how do
Right.
you learn these skills? How do you learn copywriting? How do you learn how to write a headline
Mhm.
or a sales page? Or how do you price yourself? Or how do you create a proposal? All those things. And it's been really powerful. I just launched it a few weeks ago, and it's already been amazing.
Mhm.
Like the clients are able to bring the specific things to the table that they have questions on. And it's like, it's not just, don't just trust my opinion, like hear all the other support. And it's like, the transformations are really cool. I love
And
it.
is that open enrollment, or do you have like a cohort that
No,
goes together at the same time?
no, it's an open enrollment. I
Okay.
decided this was like a passion project I just launched. It's only like $297 a month.
All right.
And it's like weekly coaching. Like right now, the price is going to be at that point. I
Mhm.
wanted to keep the price low because I want to have like purpose-driven consultants and coaches together. And so I deliberately kept the price low and really building those actionable skills. So we have like weekly master classes where it's like we have a content, and then we have hot seats and conversations, more content. It's
Mhm.
pretty cool.
So people self-select in as purpose driven. Like, what if you just want to make money? Is that not the place for you, or?
I'm not really the best fit because
Mhm.
like my belief is that the most sustainable, most scalable, most profitable business is the one that's aligned to who you are
Mhm.
and your passions. Like
Mhm.
it's especially if you're a mid-career person, like what's the point? If you just want to make money, go somewhere else. Like I'm not your girl.
Mhm.
If you want to make money doing what you love, I'm your girl, but I don't
Mhm.
really want to help. I feel like it's unethical in the consulting coaching space, to be honest.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
I mean, not to be like, I'm not trying to be judgy on other people, like if that's the way they want to do it.
Mhm.
But if I'm going to help, like when you think about the sacred role of a consultant or coach, like we help ignite transformation in either organizations or people. So let's say I'm a consultant and I go into an organization that might be struggling. If I'm just in it for the paycheck, I'm not going to take all of the issues seriously that employees and customers are going to tell me, and I'm not doing justice. Like you can't invite people to focus groups and ask them to bare their souls and not take what they're telling you with reverence. It would be saying, do you want to go to a doctor who's just in it for money without caring about
Mhm.
the patient?
Mhm.
Do you want to hire a coach who just wants to get famous, or do you want to have a coach who cares about helping you? To me,
Mhm.
the purpose driven is in alignment with the client centric, like a purpose
Mhm.
driven, client centric service. They're all the same. You cannot have a purpose driven business if you don't have somebody that you actually care about helping. Like when I talk to you on my podcast
Mhm.
about intellectual property, you are right away like, I want to help people who are experts, and I want to help women because I believe that women are all about, like wealth in the hands of women is going to make a difference in society.
Yes.
And so
Mhm.
of course I would rather like if I have all these options, like why would I go to someone who just like, oh, I'm a really smart, intellectual property attorney, please, here's my $500 an hour rate.
Mhm.
Or do I want to have someone that's like, wow, you really care about me. You care
Mhm.
about my intellectual property. You care about me having wealth so that I
Mhm.
could give back to the world.
Mhm.
And even planting the seed around how am I going to give back to the world?
Mhm.
Why would I
Mhm.
ever want to go to anyone else?
Yeah. I agree that, and that's nice. And they'll be coming at it from that point of view as a group program, that they're all on the same page about that and making sure that they're helping people. I love that. So, is there anything new in 2023 that you're seeing that's different? You've been doing this, I think you said 15 years. Like what's on the horizon, and who's coming out of corporate now, and how is it different from the people who are coming out of corporate pre-pandemic, maybe?
There actually, those are two different questions that are kind of related. Um, for people who are kind of coming out of corporate right now, I think it's just, we're seeing the residuals of the whole pandemic, post-pandemic, and people wanting more balance in their lives. And organizations, I've seen a difference in the past. Like I would say there was a shift in 2008 and there's like a shift now. Like before 2008, it seemed like customers, you had like this many customers and this many employees, and it kind of matched. 2008 with the recessions, like, okay, customers dropped off, then they dropped employees. And then when customers started coming back, they kept employees like this. And so now employees were working like 2, 3, 4 jobs, in the past, and there was no time to think and all of that. And then I think with the pandemic, it accelerated that whole thing where like the workloads are crazy, but then it's like companies are navigating the virtual workforce versus the live workforce. And I think that there's a shift from that standpoint. So I think that people are coming out are a little bit like kind of battle fatigued. They're a tight, like in 2020, like a lot of people were really energetic, like, okay, I'm going to take charge of this. I'm going to invest in my website and all of this. Right now, people have more economic uncertainty. There's more fear. And I think there's just a collective soul exhaustion that's at a different level now. Like, so I think that from that standpoint, as it relates to business development, my favorite obsession, I'm obsessed with AI. I'm obsessed with Chat GPT.
I just discovered it yesterday, like literally yesterday.
Like I've made it my, my little assistant, like like my husband walks by and he's laughing. He's like, he's like watching me like with Chat GPT, and it's like, no, that's not what I want. I want this, and I'm learning how to make Chat GPT be my junior copywriter and my junior content creator, like talking about IP. That's actually an issue for you. It's like if people are creating a body of work, like how do you differentiate between what Chat GPT is creating versus what you're creating? But it's fascinating. I could write something. I'm like, hey, can you rewrite this in the voice of Betsy Jordyn? And it like does my voice. I'm like, this is weird. Like, how do you know
So
my
you
voice?
fed it like your past writings, and then it kind of goes, okay, this is the way she generally writes. How does it?
It knows my writings. I did something, I played around with it once. It was like, I took a statement, like I took something I was working on and I'm like, write this. I'm like, can you rewrite this in the voice of Betsy Jordyn? And then it did that. And then it's like, you and I both know Carol Cox. So I'm like, can you rewrite it in the voice of Carol Cox? So speaking your brand. And then it rewrote it in Carol's language. And it's like, oh, that's so weird. It was like little shifts between the two of us. I'm like, this is fascinating.
Very fascinating.
Even little things like, hey, can you give me a script on how to confront my adult daughter who's living with me now, and how to ask her to help clean up more. And it's like, oh well, and then it would just give me a little script. I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. So there's going to be, I think that's going to be a trend that we need to be paying attention to. I think that's going to really shake up the marketing world and the content creation world in a very big way.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the reason it even came across my desk, so to speak, because I am, I'm like, to me, AI was just way outside of my, I'm like, I can't. But I was doing a legal MCLE, training about the impact of AI, like the legal implications of AI. And they're describing all the things it can do. I'm like, it can do that. It can do that. And so I immediately had to go on and go. I'm like, yeah. And so now I'm obsessed too. I spent like the afternoon like on Chat GPT. Oh my
I asked Chat GPT before our interview. I'm like, what are some good questions I could ask Erin on my podcast? And it's like, Erin Austin is an attorney and a business strategist who does X, Y, and Z. And so it gave me a bunch of ideas. Like, what inspired you to become an intellectual property attorney? Have you always worked for yourself, or did you work for a firm? What is intellectual property? What's the best way? It had all kinds of questions. Like I didn't necessarily ask you those questions, but it's like, well, that was an interesting starting point.
Yeah. Well, that is, I mean, one of the things that came out during this training is because lots of law firms have already started using it. And before we even kind of really heard about it, because they use it for document production and, doing due diligence and all this stuff. And what it will be is like, will it replace lawyers? It's like, well, no, but lawyers who don't use it will be at a massive disadvantage. And that it may even be that it could be, malpractice not to use it, because what if you miss something? If you got 1,000 documents to look at and you use people instead of AI and you miss something, is that malpractice? So, and I imagine in other industries, that because you can be more efficient and maybe, perform more quickly, more accurately, maybe charge less. that if you're not using it, that it will be a disadvantage. It will be something that, it's like someone not having a website if you're not using AI, so.
Yeah, I think I think that's an interesting, because there's like two flip sides. Like you can't really replace the expertise, but I worry that it's going to make us dumb
Right.
because I don't have to sit there. Like I didn't have to spend time I spent a lot of time thinking about like our interview and what I wanted to talk about. So, I mean, obviously I approached you in the beginning to say, I want you on the show for a particular reason, but it like the creative process of trying to figure out like, okay, what is it that I want to say? So there is a risk factor, but that's a big thing, that's coming up. It does there, but this goes to the initial point of this particular podcast is all around like thinking about profit and how to think about profit from a scale standpoint. Is it does create more efficiencies, so that allows you to scale. And if you don't have money to invest in assistance, or if you are using assistance, it allows you to do that.
Yeah, I like that. Well, you did touch on like the AI and IP and the conflicts there. But when you're working with your clients, I know, developing thought leadership and content is part of what you help them do. Like, do explicit questions about intellectual property come up? Like, what are they thinking about building IP assets? Are they thinking about possibly that journey from hourly to exit? What's happening around those issues?
So when I look at everything like in a 5-step, like I have like you and I are process people, like, so to me, there's like 5 phases of your business. Like first is like, you got to start the right business. Then you got to figure out like your brand messaging, positioning your website and getting your website situated. And then you need to be in some sort of process where you know how to convert clients. And then the ultimate place is that thought leadership, because that is where you scale. And there's no other way to scale without content. I don't believe there's no way that you're going to be a premium brand position. You can't raise your fees because without content, you're not going to look like that expert. You're not going to be, if without content, you can't really show up on social media. You can't really stand out. So I have some clients who are naturally inclined in that way, but most of my clients are a little bit afraid of intellectual property. Like they're, because of the vulnerability, like the whole, this is where the whole transition from corporate to this kind of stuff. It's like, well, I put my ideas out there. Like I remember the first time I was creating videos, it was like, I was overwhelmed. Like my first video guy, I'll never forget this whole thing. I went to his place and I wound up like staying with him and his wife. And he's like, before I left, he's like, okay, you're going to be doing scripts, you're going to be doing scripts to the teleprompter. I'm like, no, Chad, I don't do that. Like, I'm just going to be on the cuff, I'm going to be on the fly. And he's like, no, you're going to do that. I'm like, okay, fine. So I got there and I wrote some scripts. So I go downstairs and I read my script to him and he records it and he's like, nope, this is terrible. Go back up. I'm like, okay. So I go back up and then I write another one. He's like, no, this is still terrible. Go back up. And then I come back down. He's like, okay, this is good. And then like I wrote like 7 different scripts. We were hoping like for 3 videos, but once I got 3 videos up, then I was able to get like 7 that day. And like, I learned something at that particular point, like how to quickly manifest like the ideas. But then when I really got when my website launched, like I was landing clients, like I was landing clients from other parts of the world, like people I never met, 6-figure engagements because of the power of my content.
Wow.
Because I had videos, because I had all of this. So my whole global business is built on content. So content is essential. But the questions that I would ask, like first, people have to be ready for it. But where the source of your content is it's not even just in your intellectual, like your formal business experience, it's in your personal experience. So we work on like, what's your story and like, what's your big idea? Like I have a client who is a cancer survivor and at the same time when she had cancer, her dad had cancer and he had passed. And so she's all about, she's already been a productivity kind of person, but this experience like ignited her. It's like, we don't have time to waste with inefficiencies. We need to get our work done fast so we can go live our lives. And so when she works on content, it's not like, okay, let's just talk about productivity. It's talk about like, whenever we create content, it's like, okay, here's like, like, let's say somebody might say like, well, what are 5 ways that you can maximize, how the service delivery or something like that. Like, you hit the felt points and you give, the felt need, you hit the points, but then at the end it's like, and the reason why this is so important is, and it just keep reinforcing this big idea. Like for you, there's a story behind why wealth in the hands of women is important. But if you're saying, like, if you're creating content, there's always like that reiteration of like this bigger picture. Like, it's not just about creating a body of work. It's about creating wealth so that you can give back to the world.
Right. Mhm.
and keep bringing it back to that point. That's what I
Mhm.
didn't do when I started my content. And now my
Mhm.
content is like really clunky. Like I wish I had a control. So with my clients, I call it your controlling idea, kind of like your thesis of your paper.
Mhm.
Have clarity on your thesis so that everything that you write about supports that main point.
Nice. That's very nice. Well, this is a very meta podcast, I like to say. So it is about female founders for female founders of expertise-based businesses who are building a business that they can hopefully sell someday. So do you have plans, future plans for your business that may include selling?
Yeah, my husband keeps talking about this one. This is one of those things that like I would love coaching on that one because it's like it's hard for me to visualize like how would I
Mhm.
sell, my business when it's so tied to my personality.
Mhm.
So that would be something like, of course, like who wouldn't want that at some point? I don't see myself retiring ever at a point, but the idea of like having that opportunity, but I can't visualize it. So that's where I
Mhm.
would refer to someone like you, like paint a picture for me. What would that
Yeah.
look like?
Well, I like to say that the things that help you scale your business are the same things that would help you sell your business in the future. So things that are decoupling the income from you, Betsy, putting in the work. So developing frameworks, developing courses, having maybe additional coaches on, who could um, uh, run the business after you, or having something that if a bigger coaching company, Tony Robbins came over and said he wanted to buy your framework to have something that you could sell. But those are the same things that you are doing anyway to grow your business today. So yeah, so you're laying the foundations for that already.
Th-
So
That's such an interesting picture. Like I
mhm,
think that would be an interesting this thing to see it is like more like how do you paint that picture of like what would it look like
mhm,
for to sell a personal business? Obviously, Franklin Covey did it.
mhm,
They're not
right,
alive anymore.
right,
I'm sure Marshall Goldsmith's going to have the same thing. He's got a legacy business. Brene
mhm.
Brown probably has a legacy
Oh
business.
yeah, oh sure.
But it's
Uh-huh.
like how to see yourself
Uh-huh.
in that same way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then you're a parent. So we can look at our businesses as like raising children that are going to be independent from us someday. Like, how can this kid possibly be independent from us? But if we're raising them correctly and, then they will go on and succeed without us. So that's, I like to, think of it a little bit that way too. So,
Interesting.
all right. So, a couple of final questions. Um, it's something, I mean, you've mentioned your new group coaching program that you have launched, Evergreen. So where can people find you? And if there is some freebie or something that you'd like people to sign up for?
Cool. So my website is www.betsyjordyn, and Jordan's with an Y, not an A.
We'll have that in the show notes, people. Yes, thank you.
There's a Betsy Jordyn with an A out there who gets all my emails. .com. So that's my website. So you can find out more of my services. So if you go to that same URL, but add services. So I have my signature coaching program, which is like my brand messaging. That's the one that everybody goes through if they're working with me more extensively. And that's really getting clarity on your ideal business model, how you fit into the marketplace, how you stand out in the marketplace. And to me, that's the part where I've leaned in where other business mentors like gloss over, like that's the really important foundational thing. But
Yeah.
and if you want to find the academy, you just betsijordyn.com/academy. Super fun. It's like this is like my fun play area. Like the other parts, like it's hard work, like I
Mhm.
make my clients work because it's like a lot of contemplation, like pulling stuff out. But I got a ton of freebies. So if you go under like free resources, I have like I can't even I don't remember exactly how many. Like I have free templates, tools. I have a script on, how to articulate what you do. I have a e-course that's for free where I collected some of my content on imposter syndrome. Like a lot of people deal with
Mm.
imposter syndrome. So I have the cure for imposter syndrome. It's a little mini course where I have, I've collected my podcasts and some interviews and stuff like that. So that's a starting place there. So there's lots of freebies on my website. You can go to my YouTube channel. There's a ton. I was going to say a swear word. There's a ton over there. Or my Enough Already podcast. That's another passion project. Like my two fun things. Like obviously I still love my branding. I love branding so much because it's
Mhm.
like, bringing out what's in the inside of somebody out. but it
Mhm.
is a lot of work. So like my play areas is my podcast, the Enough Already podcast, and the Purpose to Profits Academy is like just, more like my play areas.
Well, since you brought up imposter syndrome, I'm just going to ask this quickly. So I have this theory that coaches, consultants, experts, like, look, don't think that they are ready for IP. Like, that's like the big people. Like, that's, and that to think that I'm ready for IP is maybe an imposter syndrome issue. Is there anything? Do I have anything there?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
I mean, I think imposter syndrome hits every single time you're hitting like a step change in your career.
Mhm.
So to me, like imposter syndrome is like, okay, do I have what it takes? Do I have what it takes? Well, that's because you're really dealing with the fear of the unknown. Like I've never done it before. And so it's like, I don't really necessarily know how to do it. But I think like what you say that is a good cure for the imposter syndrome. Well, first off, you have to normalize it. And you have
Mhm.
to say like imposter syndrome is actually like the part that makes you want to like crawl under bed and like never come out again. If you flip it into the light attribute, it's your integrity saying, I don't want to make a promise that I can't deliver. I don't want to do some of that. Like it's not just about the fear of rejection or the vulnerability, but it's also like there's an integrity element. So, from an imposter syndrome standpoint, is like, first off, you have to acknowledge it and you have to appreciate it. That it's like it's just trying to keep you safe,
Mhm.
and it's just trying to be it's not a bad part of you. Like I'm absolutely not a fan when people would say like, oh, that, all the chatter in your head, it's like,
Mhm.
it's a gremlin, you need to eradicate. I'm like, well, that's a part of you. And if you try to like suppress the bad part, you're going to suppress the good part.
Mhm.
And the good part is I still have a vision for something bigger than where I'm at right now. So if you're worrying about intellectual property, that like there's some part is like you normalize it, and you understand, well, what does it need? And it's like, well, maybe it needs someone like you who can help draw out of them, or someone like me, like we could draw out of you what your intellectual property is and validate that this is interesting.
Mhm.
Like that's interesting. And and the thing is with me with IP is I know I'm doing good IP, or is when I'm the learner. Like there's a lot of times like I'm not creating IP, I'm channeling IP.
Mm.
And it's
Mhm.
like when I'm channeling the IP, that's the interesting stuff.
Mhm.
So then it's like I just did a podcast on decoding it was decoding the profit puzzle, the difference between stable profits, sustainable profits, and scalable profits. And they're different kind of things. And it's like, it hasn't really gotten like huge hits, like, cause I think
Mhm.
people like hearing more from me about like strengths and how to communicate value, but
Mhm.
still I have that mindset. But, like, even though if it didn't perform as well as maybe all the other ones, like I learned something very different that
Right.
really prepped me for our conversation is
Right.
I'm very clear on the difference between this stable thing that the scalable thing
Mhm. Right.
that I never really thought about. Like I
Mhm.
was all about the sustainable, like I want predictability, like stable profitability is one, but sustainable, like I want to be in this over the long term, but it's like having that new vision. So it's like creating that podcast. It's like, okay, fine. It wasn't, it's not my best. It's not going to be like my seminal one, but I learned something.
Yeah.
And I think if I were going to talk to anybody who's listening about like the imposter syndrome, is I would go back to what you say is you have stuff in your head. You just have to manifest it in
Mhm.
order to make intellectual
Mhm.
property.
Right.
But I think that the other thing is that you're the first learner. If it's interesting for you, it'll be interesting for other people. And if you just go and put stuff out there, like the beauty about intellectual property, especially if you do a blog or a podcast, YouTube channel, like there's always another day,
Right.
or it's
Mhm.
like, okay, well, that one was a bust, or like
Mhm.
that one was a hit. You never know what's going to be a hit, but go with what's interesting, and you'll learn.
Yeah, and
If you go,
I was just gonna say the fastest way to continue to develop your expertise is to create more content around it, doing research around it, putting it out into the world, getting feedback on it. I mean, that not only the perception of your expertise, but the actual increase of your expertise from continuing to create.
if there's like a book I would recommend, is I would recommend Big Magic by
Mm.
Elizabeth Gilbert. If you want to get over it, is Big
Oh, okay.
Magic makes it seem like, so
Mhm.
what Elizabeth Gilbert says is ideas are energetic forms that are waiting to be manifest, and they're looking for a human collaborator to make it manifest. And it's like if you don't say yes to the idea is going to move on to somebody else.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so it's like being like looking at the ideas is like almost like a separate entity that you could do a little dance with. And it's like, then it's fun. It's like I'm having a relationship with my ideas. It's not
Mhm.
like, oh, it's so attached to me. And it's like, oh, okay, this is my ideas. It's
Mhm.
like, no, the idea is separate from me and I'm having fun with it. And I'm just bringing it to life. Like, again, the best content is going to be the one that you channel, not necessarily create. So the
Mhm.
more you're in your head, the less interesting it's going to be for you
Yes.
and for your audience.
Mhm. Yeah, agreed. All right, nice little bonus at the end there. Thank you so much, Betsy.
Thank you, Erin. It was so much fun being on your show. And I'm so excited about what you do. I'm fascinated by everything that you say. And I cannot recommend you enough to anybody who's working on, really monetizing their body of work. You have the right heart, the right mind. You've got the whole package. So thank
Oh,
you for having me on the show.
well, thank you. This has been a joy.